Alan, would you close the door? Yes, sir. It's a great group here today. The largest groups I've seen in this class. It's super. We're very excited today to have Dr. Jamieson and doctoral student Thomas Orr speak with us today. This is some research that Dr. Jamieson has been doing on and off for over 20 years. And a lot of it came through, was really fortified through two of her sabbaticals. One was in Australia, and the more recent one was in Scotland. So it'll be nice to hear some information about that. And Tom is going to be, she has been mentoring Tom through his process, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about that as well. So thank you for tuning in.
Okay. Well, this presentation is a little bit of a mind blower because it involves a long, ongoing, emerging process of qualitative research. And I will present this. I'm going to present it in two ways. One is to deal with the research itself, and the other is to deal with the mentorship of a lot of graduate students and research colleagues who have been engaged in this process for a long time. So that's what I'd like to start off with. And this is about government policy on sport and leisure, a cross-cultural comparison study that is going on right now. And I hope at the end of it, some of you feel invited or compelled to work with us on it. I've had a lot of different research interests, and they're fairly far-ranging. And so over the years, I've had a chance to focus. But I started off research with doing work with competencies in recreational sport. That was my doctoral dissertation. I found that the instrument that I developed was replicated 15 times by other people. So when I came to IU, I then had, there were two doctoral students and a few others who used information who actually developed the instrument better. And it's now competencies of sport managers, and it's a general instrument that's available for use if you want to measure those kinds of things. And you can use it also as an adaptation for other areas if you want. But it's a fairly well-used one, so I wanted to see if the psychometrics of the instrument could also be studied. And it's now a reliable instrument. It's been used in several different places for facility managers, for competencies in recreation specialists in general, and then also the recreational sport area. So I think it's a good one. And then I have been interested in tourism as a revitalization tool. That interest started in California when I was in California Polytechnic State University. And I had a sabbatical, and there we're on the quarter system, and it's only 10 weeks long. And in that case, I chose this one because tourism was booming in California at the time, and yet we still had some issues with the economy. So the space shuttle disaster impacted Lompoc, California. We had the marijuana camp raids up in Eureka that impacted tourism there because there was so much about it. Everybody thought that people up in Humboldt County were potheads, and it was partly true, but that caused a problem. I also went to Barstow, and Barstow's in sort of a faraway place halfway between LA and Las Vegas, and looked at the impact of just being a place you drive by. So those are some of the interests I had, but those aren't the ones I stayed with. Sport and violence emerged as an interest over time because of what I saw and heard and experienced in the sport area, in the community recreation area, and even in some cases with my own children. And so that's where Tom and I linked initially with some of that area, and we co-wrote and literally co-authored this book. And in this case, Tom is an equal 50% author, and he gets royalties on this book. Okay, I'm just mentioning that as a model, and it's something I believe in. And Razul Moat wrote a chapter in the book, and is a colleague as well. But he didn't get the authorship because he only wrote a chapter, so we just, sorry. I'll have to work on something else. But anyway, policy development started to interest me because I'm concerned about the United States and its policies towards sport and leisure. We are very fragmented, and even as I started discussing this area, I was quoted through an AP article one time as saying, the government, the national government, the United States, should have some kind of policy towards sport. And I got an amazing number of reactions that lasted for about 5 years. People who were doctors and who said, yes, we need more policies because we treat disease, we treat these problems. I heard from Tommy Thompson from the Health and Human Services, who was quoted in the paper as saying, the good professor doesn't really know what we really are doing in Health and Human Services, sort of a patronizing kind of a thing. And then I heard from 8th graders who wanted to lose weight. I mean, you name it, it's just this broad area. So at that point, I became encouraged, thinking perhaps maybe some of this research will inform what the United States should do. So instead of setting this up, I purposely avoided doing any research on the United States until after I collected data from a lot of other countries. And then more recently, and after the collection of 13 countries, I came upon an article by Barry Houlihan, which was Policy Framework Analysis. And I had followed through on my own setup of how to collect this data, but found that the emerging design of this research and analysis, I was informed through this that this might be a way to analyze. So that's kind of a little bit where I am at this point. This is a very broad-ranging study, and so you will get results in about 4 tables from 3 countries, but we have 13 countries. And we had hoped to have more to give you today, but the data was lost over Christmas, not by me, or Frank, or anybody, but it was wiped off a computer, and we have it, but it just has to be re-entered. We had hoped to give you some preliminary results. And I'm sharing a few things like that just to know that it happens to everybody. But when we think about government policies, they develop as a result of the ideology of a particular nation. So some countries we know that ideology can be very controlling. And in others it can be very, let's say, fair, a looser framework. So, you know, in reading you want to know about the country and kind of where it comes from. But either way, it usually supports a lot of different concepts and a lot of different social structures, with or without dictate. For example, there's social policy that can form from the ideology, and Kay in 2000 indicated that gender relations are often played out in the domestic environment as a result of the ideology. It influences how people react to gender and how they deal with things through their social practices. There's also a conflict in the role of that ideology on leisure studies and policy, because often what we may want to do in that area, we may find it conflicts with a particular ideology of a nation or of a nation where you're residing. Also, we see that the traditional organizational structure effect has leisure policy in the community. So often, whatever the social structure is, the traditions will be more apt to operate how sport is engaged in versus non-traditional systems. And to use this as an example, think about sport in the United States and then think about alternative sport or extreme sport and how both of them, one comes up through a formal structure, others comes up through kind of an emerging structure. And also, the idea of the social policy could actually help the national policy be more harmonized, so that they were set in sort of working hand in hand with each other. So whatever happens at the local level in terms of social practice needs to be reflected by whatever the national policies are, and often they are in conflict. There's dissonance. We've certainly seen the misuse of sport for commercial, financial, and political gains, and that can often control and really diminish the goals that are set forth for the average consumer of sport. The day-to-day use of sport and fitness as a way of life. So there is that disconnect. Also, one thing to think about is trying to define the policy and aims and objectives of leisure services and move beyond the worthy but rhetorical objectives, such as contributing to the quality of life for the needs of the community. That's an important opportunity to try to look at that, and we can see that it's been happening more in Europe, but it's happening now right in our country. we're more concerned, and we're certainly concerned here about defining the role of leisure policy. Our role in the School of Public Health and some of these other things are important aspects. Not just, it's fun, I'm doing it because I'm doing it, I did this many times. What are you getting out of it? So, let me go back to the Olympics for a minute, and I won't go all the way back to the Greek Olympics, I promise you. But the early growth of the Olympic movement was set up to concern itself with developing elite athletes, but also that all citizens need sport and fitness as a part of a healthy way of life. That was an original process. Sport for all, which I'll define a little bit later, was an outgrowth of that early concern, but the original effort was really targeted for all, that beginner right up through the top. Programs that grew from there were a result of the national sport and leisure policies that were set at the national level, because the Olympic movement was an international movement. So all countries started to get in and buy into that at that point. In 1909, Pierre de Coubertin, who's the pioneer of the Olympic movement, the modern Olympics, he noted that role. He said, not only developing elite athletes, but also contributing to the overall well-being of every citizen. Sport for all, then, should be developed from education for all and de Coubertin's broad definition of Olympism. So that did give way to the concept of mass sport fitness. This movement started in Europe, and it was started to counterbalance elite sport. So it was dealing with really sport and recreation at the local level, active engagement, and that type of thing. Council of Europe organized it in 1964, and it started with 10 countries. It expanded quickly to 17 countries in the European area, and now there are over 140 countries who have some identifiable form of sport and leisure at the national level. They have a motive and a concern about it. Okay, so that's kind of the sample that we can draw from. The values of sport for all have been known to be the following: humanism, a human-related concept rather than achievement; social, that campaign, a collective campaign to affect societies through participation in sport, broadly engage them; and health and fitness, which was a promotion of health and prevention of disease. This has always been the concept of what a Sport for All program is. So it's broader, and that's why I use the term government policy on sport and leisure, because it does really encompass, regardless of the term, it encompasses a lot more at the national level. And Hunela in 1991 identified those. And here's some examples of fairly early government campaigns that are national.